Brother, thank you for doing this. This was crazy. So we had to get the guy that does this every day of his life to kind of help us to get this thing started. Vocab, from your experience, what is it? Is it? Is it? Is it? Is it?
Next up, yo, I believe that's me. I believe that's me. I believe that's me. Next up, yo, I believe that's me. I believe that's me. I believe that's me. Next up, yo, I believe that's me. I believe that's me. I believe that's me. Next up, yo, I believe that's me. I believe that's me. I believe that's me.
Shalom, Lach, Adav, Yasharah, and to others, Shalom, Lach, Edah, Israel. What is going on here? Another group call themselves Urban Apologists, completely disrespected Pastor Kelly. Are you serious? With everything that's going on with the coronavirus, their main concern is disrespecting Pastor Kelly along with the Hebrew Israelite community? I guess they haven't heard what he did to that G. Craig Lewis and how he completely domesticated that Dow guy, Pastor Kelly. I'm still trying to figure out how you connected him to R.J. Stair and that Craig Mack. The flavor in your ear. What's going on? What are you going to do about this? These fools done smoked your cousin. Actually, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. They didn't do none of that. I just always wanted to say that lie. Nevertheless, how can you get out of this? Pastor Kelly, you used 2 of your 5 smooth stones already. I guess it's time for you to use your 3rd one now. Again, you got your work cut out for you. Shalom.
Brothers. I got a feeling somebody's trying to speak in my.
Well, just call him an Edomite. A cracker. Oh, he's black. Oh, call him Coon. Call him Coon. What's up, Richard? Call him Coon. Yes. Private eye for Yahushua at your service. Shalom, Holmes.
Read Leviticus 11:4. The camel, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean to you.
Like I always say. Vocab Malone, and I am with my man today, Jay the producer. Oh, I got another idea. Brother Jay, have you ever sang parodies before? You know, a parody, like a satire song?
Have I ever sung one?
Yeah, a parody.
No, I've never sung a parody, man.
I'm not gonna put you on the spot right now, but check it out. I wrote a parody to something, bro. I think that this thing's hilarious. I'm gonna see if you're down to do it, and I'm gonna make a video out of this joint. You know that song by Miley Cyrus, "Party in the USA"?
Yeah.
Yo, slavery in the USA, bro.
Oh man,
I got a whole song, man, and I can't sing it.
Talk about that one
All right. You've heard about the anti-Semitic attack by 2 black Hebrew Israelites in New Jersey in December 2019. You're wondering why. You want to understand, why did David Anderson and Francine Graham murder 4 people? Why did this couple specifically target Jewish Americans? I'm a researcher who specializes in what is called the Hebrew Israelite community. If you want to understand the Jersey City shootings, give me 13 minutes and I'll give you 5 reasons. Now, I'm going to show you the 5 ways Anderson's beliefs connect directly to his horrendous actions. These are the 5 reasons for David Anderson's wicked murders.
There has been considerable reporting that these 2 suspects are linked to the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. We have evidence that both suspects expressed interest in this group, but we have not definitively established any formal links to that organization or to any other group. Based on the available evidence, we believe that the 2 shooters were acting on their own.
The specific group Anderson was a part of, the ICGJC, prophesied this climactic event was going to happen in 1999.
There has been considerable reporting that these 2 suspects are linked to the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. We have evidence that both suspects expressed interest in this group, but we have not definitively established any formal links to that organization or to any other group. Based on the available evidence, we believe that the 2 shooters were acting on their own. We recognize that many in the community are anxious to learn about what happened, to learn more about what happened. And we're committed to providing additional information as soon as we can confirm the accuracy of that information. At times like this, it's especially important that the press and the public stick to the facts as they're officially reported by our offices. During the early stages of an investigation, others may have incomplete or inaccurate information.
Shout out to Adam Coleman, Tony Ray of Hazakim, G-Man, Sister Cherry, my man Nissan Cran. Shout out to G-Con. Shout out to So Real. Shout out to Abu, Raquel, Kadash. Shout out to Damon Richardson. Shout out to Jordan Ortiz. Hey, there's some others, but I won't do everybody right now.
Go ahead. You got 20 seconds.
There's a Netflix movie that came out in 2016, and it's about young Obama when he's 21 years old, and he has to live in Harlem while he's going to Columbia, which is in New York. And he's walking on the street in one of the scenes, and it shows him debating a Hebrew Israelite camp. And so I take that scene. No one knows if it happened or not, but the things said are very real things that very likely could have been said, and his path would have totally allowed him to run into them as well. We kind of mapped it out with some friends that live there. And this little miniature debate is perfect to have it act as a launching pad, a jumping off point to explain Hebrew Israel-ism. And it's a catchy title that's been very controversial,
I bet
as
it
you
has.
can imagine.
So when we talk about Hebrew Israel-ism, let's say that, can one of y'all just give a definition of what Hebrew Israel-ism in general is? Like George, it'd be dope if you chimed in real strong on that. Like, in a nutshell, what is it? Vocab, from your experience, what is it? And kind of, because I look through the feed, there's a lot of new people in here they're just starting to get their mind wrapped around. Like they just heard somebody was a Hebrew Israelite in their family. They don't even know what that is, what that means. So if we can help people out to kind of get their minds around it, definition-wise, that'll be dope.
Hey, Brother George.
Obviously, me having a personal experience from Hebrew Israelism, it's I guess it's how can I say?
We have a lot to cover in this video. We are going to further expose the urban apologists for who they are. In this video, we are going to further expose the racist vocab alone and further expose the witchcraft this entire group operates in. Notice how the urban apologists did not respond to my challenge. In the first video, I challenged the entire group to a debate. The subject is the urban apologist group good for black people. In the debate, my request is to have Bishop Mason, Damon Richardson, Vocab alone, Nefer Nitty, and whoever else they would like to add to the panel. I can handle the entire group by myself. Let's begin with Romans chapter 1, verse 22. It says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. The Urban Apologist, or the Psuedo Apologia, embodies this verse. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. The Greek word for the transliterated word fool is morano, which means foolish, dull, stupid, idiotic. In the English, the word is moron. Here is an example of how foolish this group of morons is. Let's start with understanding the phrase Hebrew Israel-ism. What is Hebrew Israel-ism?
Obviously, me having a personal experience from Hebrew Israel-ism, it's, I guess it's, how can I say?
Here's one of the thumbnails from one of Vocab's videos titled Violence and Hebrew Israel-ism. Pay attention to the thumbnail and the message he is pushing. I'd like to see Vocab alone do a video titled Violence and Calvinism or Violence and Christianity. I would like him to compare the so-called violence in what he calls Hebrew Israel-ism and compare it to the violence and racism of a group of Calvinists who brought apartheid to South Africa. I would like for him to calculate how many Negroes Christianity, which is nothing more than a branch of Catholicism, kidnapped, enslaved, and murdered. Again, what is Hebrew Israel-ism?
Obviously, me having a personal experience from Hebrew Israel-ism, it's, I guess it's, how can I say?
Let's start with the etymology dictionary definition of the transliterated word Hebrew. It says, an Israelite, one from the other side. Again, it says, an Israelite. Actually, a Hebrew is anyone who is born through the bloodline of Eber. This means Lot and his Moabite and Amorite descendants are Hebrews. Ishmael and Esau, along with all of their descendants, are Hebrews. The Israelites did not have a monopoly on the transliterated word Hebrew, which comes from the ancient word Ibar. Next, let's define the transliterated word Israelite. The etymology dictionary definition of Israelite says, a Jew, one of the people of the ancient Israel, a descendant of or Jacob. In this definition, it says that an Israelite is a Jew. That's part of the deceptive confusion which theologians along with the Jewish community as we know them began to push in the 14th century. Actually, the word Jew is a word that evolved in the English language. In the 4th century AD, in Old English, which is a Germanic language, is where you would initially find the first usage of this deceptive word. Initially, it was used as a transliteration of the Greek word Udeos. Udeos actually means the name of one of Jacob's sons called Judah, which comes from the ancient Hebrew word Yehowadah or Yehudi. Also, this is the name of one of the 12 tribes. It is the name of the southern kingdom. It wasn't until the 14th century the word Jew was used interchangeably or synonymously with the word Israel. So if we put the words I covered so far in its proper order, an Israelite is a Hebrew and Judah is an Israelite. On a side note, I'm still waiting for the response from the entire Urban Apologists in what I brought out in the video I did in response to Nefer Nitty's video about the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. I gave the etymology of the word Israeli, which says citizen of the state of Israel. It distinguishes the citizens of the modern state from the ancient people. Again, the word Israeli is used to make a distinction between those who in the current state of Israel from those who are aboriginal to the land. I confirmed this by using the Jewish Almanac 1980, page 3, to further explain the differences in their own words. It says, strictly speaking, it is incorrect to call an ancient Israelite a Jew or to call a contemporary Jew an Israelite or a Hebrew. The first Hebrews may not have been Jews at all.
What are the facts? The Jews, I call them Jews to you because they're known as Jews. I don't call them Jews. I refer to them as so-called Jews because I know what they are. If Jesus was a Jew, there isn't a Jew in the world today. And if those people are Jews, certainly our Lord and Savior was not one of them. And I can prove that. Now what happened? The Eastern European Jews, who form 92% of the world's population of those people who call themselves Jews, were originally Khazars. They were a warlike tribe that lived deep in the heart of Asia. And they were so warlike that even the Asiatics drove them out of Asia into Eastern Europe. And to reduce this, so you don't get too confused about the history of Eastern Europe, they set up this big Khazar kingdom, 800,000 square miles. Only there was no Russia, there were no other countries, and the Khazar kingdom was the biggest country in all Europe. So big and so powerful that when the other monarchs wanted to go to war, the Khazars would loan them 40,000 soldiers. That's how big and powerful they were. Now, they were phallic worshippers, which is filthy. I don't want to go into the details of that now. It was their religion, the way it was the religion of many other pagans or barbarians elsewhere in the world. Now, the king became so disgusted with the degeneracy of his kingdom that he decided to adopt a so-called monotheistic faith, either Christianity, Islam, the Muslim faith, or what is known today as Judaism, really Talmudism. So, like spinning a top, he said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and he picked out so-called Judaism. And that became the state religion, and he sent down to the Talmudic schools of Palumbitha and Surah, and brought up thousands of these rabbis with their teachings, and he opened up synagogues and schools in his kingdom of 800,000 people, 800,000 square miles, and maybe 10 to 20 million people, and they became what we call Jews. There wasn't one of them that ever had an ancestor that ever put a toe in the Holy Land, not alone in Old Testament history, but back to time, the beginning of time. Not one of them. And yet they come to the Christians and they ask us to support their armed insurrection in Palestine by saying, well, you want to certainly help repatriate God's chosen people to their promised land, their ancestral homeland. It's your Christian duty. We gave you one of our boys as your Lord and Savior. You now go to church on Sunday and kneel, and you worship a Jew, and we are Jews. Well, they were pagan Khazars who were converted just the same as the Irish. And it's just as ridiculous to call them people of the Holy Land as it would be. There are 54 million Chinese Muslims. 54 million. And Muhammad only died in 620 A.D., so in that time, 54 million Chinese have accepted Islam as their religious belief. Now imagine in China, 2,000 miles away from Arabia, where the city of Mecca is located, where Muhammad was born, imagine if the 54 million Chinese called themselves Arabs.
Again, what is Hebrew Israel-ism? Let's define the prefix ism. Let's define the prefix ism. The etymology dictionary definition of the word ism says, word forming element making nouns, implying a practice, system, doctrine, signifying the practice or teaching of a thing. Again, This word means implying a practice, a system, a doctrine. So again, what is Hebrew Israelism?
Go ahead. You got 20 seconds.
There's a Netflix movie that came out in 2016, and it's about young Obama when he's 21 years old, and he has to live in Harlem while he's going to a Columbia, which is in New York. And he's walking on the street in one of the scenes, and it shows him debating a Hebrew Israelite camp. And so I take that scene. No one knows if it happened or not, but the things said are very real things that very likely could have been said, and his path would have totally allowed him to run into them as well. We kind of mapped it out with some friends that live there. And this little miniature debate is perfect to have it act as a launching pad, a jumping off point to explain Hebrew Israelism. And it's a catchy title that's been very controversial,
I bet
as
it
you
has.
can imagine.
So when we talk about Hebrew Israelism, let's say that, can one of y'all just give a definition of what Hebrew Israelism in general is? Like George, it'd be dope if you chimed in real strong on that. Like, in a nutshell, what is it? Vocab, from your experience, what is it? And kind of, because I look through the feed, there's a lot of new people in here they're just starting to get their mind wrapped around. Like they just heard somebody was a Hebrew Israelite in their family. They don't even know what that is, what that means. So if we can help people out to kind of get their minds around it, definition wise, that'll be dope.
Hey, Brother George.
Obviously, me having a personal experience from Hebrew Israelism, it's I guess it's how can I say?
Simply put, it is the doctrine and teaching of the Hebrew Israelites. One of the doctrines of Hebrew Israelism, which the Hebrew Israelite Messiah taught from, is the law and the prophets. The Hebrew Israelite disciples also taught Hebrew Israelism from the Hebrew Israelite doctrine called the law and the prophets. These Hebrew Israelites also taught the testimonies of the Hebrew Israelite Messiah, which is called the Gospels. So again, what is Hebrew Israelism? The entire Bible is a Hebrew Israelite doctrine called Hebrew Israelism. Calvinism is not a Hebrew Israelite doctrine. It is the doctrine of a European who created commentaries based on his warped understanding of Hebrew Israelism. As we see, the apple did not fall too far from the tree because the entire Urban Apologists are Calvinists. This is an example of professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Let's deal with another keyword, urban. The etymology dictionary definition of the word urban says characteristic of city life, pertaining to cities or towns, of or pertaining to a city or city life. It goes on to say, in late 20th century, American English gradually acquiring a suggestion of African American. So again, the word urban is now used synonymously with the city life and neighborhoods of the African Americans. So the phrase urban apologist actually means to defend the city life and neighborhoods of the Negroes. Name one killing of a Negro Vocab alone has defended. Name one racial killing such as Ahmaud Arbery, who was lynched by Christians and supported by over 100,000 Christians and a Facebook group who refer to these killers as God-fearing. He is completely silent on the murder of George Floyd and the killing of Breonna Taylor. Better yet, name one video Vocab alone has done in regards to his concerns about the coronavirus and its impact on the urban community. The only video he has done in regards to the coronavirus is his video of a Hebrew Israelite who was leading a camp who died from this virus. Yet, this racist has the audacity to call the Hebrew Israelites racist, and yet he thinks it's okay to use the word coon in his attempt to mock the Hebrew Israelite Messiah.
Oh, he's black. Call him a coon. Call him a coon. Works every time. Call him a coon. Shout out to Adam Coleman, Tony Ray of Hazakim, G-Man, Sister Cherry, my man Nissan Cran. Shout out to G-Con. Shout out to So Real. Shout out to Abu, Raquel, Kadash. Shout out to Damon Richardson. Shout out to Jordan Ortiz. Hey, there's some others, but I won't do everybody right now.
Is it a coincidence that Vocab Malone gets around? Is it a coincidence that you see him playing all sides of the fence? You see him with Hank the Answer Man, James White, Bishop Eric Mason, and even some of the camps. By the way, didn't Bishop Eric Mason call James White a racist because of his views on what he believes to be a lack of sound theology within the black church? Yet, he did not have a problem with James White stating that the Hebrew Israelites are worse than the Christian organization, the KKK.
I mean, these people are racists in such a way that the KKK looks like amateurs in comparison to these guys. They get away with it because they're of a different color, and you can be racist if you're that color. But these people are just... This is the worst example of using and abusing religion as a cover for racism that you'll ever see. So I say to Urban Apologetics, shame on you.
Or suggest that black people need to get over the horrendous acts of the transatlantic slave trade, which I refer to as the Transatlantic World War.
I'm primarily Scottish, British, and German. That's an interesting mixture. Could cause all sorts of internal conflicts if I lived in light of what happened to my ancestors, but I don't. And you know what? I can look back at each one of my racial groups. Man, the Scots were treated like garbage. They were enslaved. I'm not going to demand reparations. I don't think it has something to do with me today. Why does anyone think that? I don't understand it. It seems absolutely, abjectly absurd to me. To go, hey, well, you know, this happened 150 years ago, so I can live this way, or you owe me that.
James White's comments fall right in line with the narrative many used during President Trump's run for the office of the president. We got over it, so why can't you? Did you notice how Bishop Eric Mason allowed James White to disrespect Muhammad Tazimur, who was under his ministry at the time? Yet, somehow, Vocab Malone managed to straddle the fence with both of them. Is it a coincidence that the Urban Apologists shifted their narrative from the history of West Africa and its connection to the ancient Hebrew Israelites to the focus of who can read the writings on the pews, in which Abu made it clear that he cannot read them himself? This Psuedo Apologia group was and is being exposed. Why? It's because they have no answers. They are attempting to pivot their narrative to the pews in Savannah, Georgia, in an attempt to bring the illiterate overtone to discredit the awakening that's taken place. This is why you see this pseudo group making an assertive effort to discredit those that are in the camps for using what they call Lashawan Quadash, which simply means holy word. What you are witnessing is an attempted virtual lynching that's on full display from this pseudo group. What you see is a group that's bloodthirsty and will defend their lies at any and every cost. They are willing to use a hoodoo priest to substantiate their false claims.
In America, people say that Wida means Judah from the Bible. Is there any truth to that? I think now that is nonsense. That is nonsense. They are really wrong. Okay. Nobody knows about Judah here. Nobody knows about Judah here. Nobody knows about Judah here.
Hey guys, it's Neffy. Thank you for joining me today. As you guys know, I am an urban apologist. I answer questions having to do with being black and being Christian. So basically what they're saying is, because this map says Kingdom of Judah, that means tribe of Judah, that means Hebrew Israelites, that means me, you, and all our mama them, we Hebrews. But what do the people of Benin have to say? You know, the people who actually live there.
I think now that is nonsense. Because we have nothing like Judah in our things. What when we hear Weda, you know, Weda, even the real name is Weda.
Is there any way, can the elder share with us a way to identify who's a real priest and who's a fake priest?
You know, now the problem, what is happening now, and everybody can stand up, they say we have voodoo or I'm Uno, I'm this. It is simply another business.
Right.
That people discover charms.
Right.
They make their own, they create their own God, they say this is the, and it is supernatural powers that they use, and they tell lies to people that they know about voodoo, but that is not voodoo at all. Because when you come here, they know how many houses of voodoo we have in our city. You understand?
Yes.
But in your house, if you happen where you are now to have a charm,
yes,
that you can use spirit to protect yourself or to steal or to fight against people, you can call yourself voodoo or Uno.
They are willing to distort history to pacify the mob who are crying out for souvenirs of the victims they have lynched. Pay attention to this thumbnail of a video Vocab Malone did titled ISUPK Laughs at Slavery, Dante Forston Silence. This was Vocab Malone's attempt to cover up his videos that's filled with racist parodies. This same video that contains black men reading from an upside down Tanakh.
Read Leviticus 11:4. The cowl, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean to you.
Like I always say.
His usage of the word coon in attempt to mock those who refer to the Hebrew Israelite Messiah by the name Yahweh Shai.
Well, just call him an Edomite. A cracker. Oh, he's black. Call him a coon. Call him a coon. Works every time. Call him a coon. Yes. Private eye for Yahweh Shai at your service. Shalom, Holmes.
In this thumbnail, Vocab Design placed duct tape over the mouth of the image of Dante in the form of an X and the number 400 on his forehead. If you truly understand the term Generation X, it means no identity, lack of direction. Is it simply coincidental the sudden string of videos Vocab Malone has done on black Christians?
The man we're going to be talking about right now, 1850 to 1937. He is thought to be America's first black preacher. John Moran, I guess, was like a good French horn player. Haynes was born in 1753, so you can tell we're going back pretty far. He was the illegitimate so-called offspring of a black man and a white woman. He lived 1845 to 1928. He was actually born in a relatively well-to-do family, Equiano. born in 1745. He's born in March 1865, a month before slavery was supposedly eradicated. So let's start with Alexander Crummell. I believe the story is her master hit her with a rock, and it caused her headaches for the rest of her life. And in fact, she told a story of how she prayed for his death because of this, so she didn't have forgiveness in her heart, even though I believe she was a Christian at that time, so that's why she was praying. You can understand the reaction though, right? And the guy actually died. So he ended up dying. And she felt horrible afterwards and said, you know what, instead what I should have done is I should have tried to lead him to Christ. Vocab Malone, and I am with my man today, Jay the producer. Jay the producer. Oh, I got another idea. Brother Jay, have you ever sang parodies before? You know, a parody, like a satire song?
Have I ever sung one?
Yeah, a parody.
No, I've never sung a parody, man.
I'm not gonna put you on the spot right now, but check it out. I wrote a parody to something, bro. I think that this thing's hilarious. I'm gonna see if you're down to do it, and I'm gonna make a video out of this joint. You know that song by Miley Cyrus, "Party in the USA"?
Yeah.
Yo, slavery in the USA, bro.
Oh man.
I got a whole song, man, and I can't sing it.
Talk about that one all
Right. Oh, he's black. Call him a coon. Call him a coon. What's up, time? Call him a coon. Yes. Private eye for Yahweh Shai service. Shalom, Holmes.
These videos have the overtone, these are the good Negroes. They have the overtone of, these are the civilized Negroes. Is it simply coincidental that most of his videos are about the Hebrew Israelites? Let's identify the actual spirit the entire Psuedo Apologia community is operating under, starting with a key prophecy shared by the Hebrew Israelite Messiah. Matthew chapter 24, verse 4 through 9 says, "And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake." The Hebrew definition of the word sorrow in ancient Hebrew is pronounced makabai, and in the Israeli language it's pronounced makob. It says anguish, affliction, grief, pain. The Greek definition of the transliterated word sorrow is pronounced odin. It means path, sorrow, travail, intolerable anguish, in reference to the dire calamities precede the advent of the Messiah. The actual term in Greek is archaeodin, which transliterates to the beginning of sorrows. We can actually refer to this as the time of Odin. Who is Odin? Odin is the god of the hanged. Norse All-Father, again called the god of the hanged because the trees on his sacred grove at Uppsala were laden with hanged human sacrifices, even as the late 10th century. Each victim's dramar, in other words drama, recapitulated, in other words retell or commemorate the death rebirth of Odin himself when he acquired his divine powers by giving himself up to immolation. In other words, sacrifice. On the world tree, the Christmas tree, wounded in the side with a spear.
The Hebrew Israelite Messiah said that what? These are the beginnings of what? The spirit of Odin. All right? Now let me break down Odin real quick just so that way get everyone up to speed here. See, when you understand Odin, then you can better understand the lynching of the Hebrew Israelite Messiah. It'll make sense why they pierced him in his side. It'll make sense why they brutalized him, tortured him the way that they did. Because if you understand Odin, he is called the god of the hanged. He is called the god of the hanged. So the homage that is paid towards him is they'll take a human sacrifice, a victim, and hang them on what? The tree. And when they hang them on the tree, they'll take the spear and pierce that person to bring drama to that person in paying homage to Odin. Oh, y'all grabbing hold of this, right? See, when you understand, the Romans mocked Christ. When they put King of Kings, Lord of Lords over over the cross, guess what? That was to mock him. So part of that mockery was what? Even how they what? Killed him. They were paying homage to their gods. See, the Greek gods, the Roman gods are still interchangeable. And then when we fast forward with Odin, Odin is interchangeable with them because Odin is what? The Norse god. And you wonder why we're struggling with the Christmas tree. And we get better clarity while we see the bulbs are hanging on what? The Christmas tree. Because that is paying homage to who? Odin. For the drama of each victim that is what? Hung on this tree. But that's the heads. So when you understand the time of Odin, especially when you understand what happened to the Hebrew Israelite Messiah, not just him, the disciples were treated this way. And guess what? Israel, when the Romans sacked Jerusalem, guess what? That's what they did to those that they captured. But that wasn't the first time. If you read the Maccabees and you understand Josephus, he even said the Greeks did the same thing during that period. So when we understand lynching, that is a satanic ritual to bring what? Drama to their victim to pay homage to their God. So when we say the time of what? Sorrow, we're actually saying the time of who? Odin. When you say the time of the Gentiles, that doesn't make sense. Why? Because Gentiles simply means what? Nation. So you're just saying what? The time of the nations. It's always the time of the nations. But when you say the time of Odin, that's a different, now you're being more specific. Right? And that's what we're dealing with right now. The time of Odin, which is what? Anguish, pain, hurt. Are we not feeling that right now? How many of us are hurt right now? I'm hurt right now. I'm hurt right now. Why? Because of knowing the perpetual situation that we're dealing with. I'm hurt right now. Why? Because, no matter how hard you try to get our own people to come together, we still find a reason why we stay divided because of what? The system that we were what? Raised up in. We were given a Messiah that looks just like what? Odin. And we wonder why many of our people struggle with letting Santa Claus go. Because Santa Claus is actually Odin. And St. Nicholas, right, is actually the person that signed the edict to enslave us in 1442. His last name was Nicholas. And they call him Saint what?
Odin is synonymous to the Greek god Zeus and the Roman god Jupiter. The prophecy of the time or beginning of Odin is the time of drama, a time of great pain, a time of lynching. This ritual sacrifice is what we now call lynching. The Hebrew Israelite Messiah was lynched. The Hebrew Israelite disciples were lynched. When the Romans sacked Jerusalem in 70 AD, all the Hebrew Israelites that they were able to capture was lynched. To this day, the Hebrew Israelites are still being lynched. One of the latest victims, Ahmaud Arbery. Let's see if Vocab alone speak up for Ahmaud Arbery the way he did for Joy Morgan, since he was so concerned about the death of Joy Morgan in his video titled Justice for Joy Morgan of IUIC. Let's see if he's going to speak against the Christian murderers Gregory and Travis McMichael. Let's see if he speaks out against the Christian group called Justice for Gregory and Travis McMichael, which now has over 100,000 members in this Christian group who refers to these murderers as two God-fearing men. The question is, what God do they fear? The God that they fear and serve is their God Odin. Matthew chapter 27 verse 35 says, "And they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots." Again, they parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. This means the Romans who lynched the Hebrew Israelite Messiah took souvenirs. The etymology dictionary of souvenirs says a remembrance or memory, come to mind, token, memento. Throughout what was called the lynching period, all the participants in this satanic ritual to Odin took souvenirs. These perpetrators sold souvenirs such as actual body parts of the victim. For example, Sam Holt. This is coming from the 100 Years of Lynching, Ginsburg Ralph. This is from the section titled Negro Burned Alive in Florida. It says, before the torch was applied to the pyre, the Negro was deprived of his ears, fingers, and genital parts of his body. He pleaded pitifully for his life while the mutilation was going on, but stood the whole ordeal of fire with surprising fortitude. Before the body was cool, it was cut to pieces. The bones were crushed into small bits, and even the tree upon which the wretch met his fate was torn up and disposed of as souvenirs. The Negro's heart was cut into several pieces, as was also his liver. Again, this is satanic rituals. The Negro's heart was cut into several pieces, as was also his liver. Those who were unable to obtain the ghastly relics direct paid their more fortunate possessors extravagant sums for them. Small pieces of bones went for 25 cents, and a bit of the liver crisply cooked sold for 10 cents. As soon as the Negro was seen to be dead, there was a tremendous struggle among the crowd, which had witnessed his tragic end, to secure the souvenirs. A rush was made for the stake, and those near the body were forced against it and had to fight for their freedom. Knives were quickly produced, and soon the body was dismembered. Sam Holt and thousands upon thousands of others within the Negro community were subjected to these satanic rituals dedicated to the god of these perpetrators, Odin. This is what the Urban Apologists, who I refer to Psuedo Apologia, are operating under this same spirit. They have purposely insulted the Hebrew Israelite community with the goals of triggering a response and then hide behind their deceptive videos. They have made every attempt to virtually lynch those whom they deem to be a threat to them. The souvenirs they collect is writing books, uploading videos, with the goal of obtaining likes and subscribers, and ultimately money. Let me continue to expose this group and their lack of knowledge of history. Let's start with debunking "we got over it, so why can't you?"
I mean, these people are racists in such a way that the KKK looks like amateurs in comparison to these guys. They get away with it because they're of a different color, and you can be racist if you're that color. But these people are just... This is the worst example of using and abusing religion as a cover for racism that you'll ever see. So I say to Urban Apologetics, shame on you. I'm primarily Scottish, British, and German. That's an interesting mixture. Could cause all sorts of internal conflicts if I lived in light of what happened to my ancestors, but I don't. And you know what? I can look back at each one of my racial groups. Man, the Scots were treated like garbage. They were enslaved. I'm not going to demand reparations. I don't think it has something to do with me today. Why does anyone think that? I don't understand it. It seems absolutely, abjectly absurd to me. To go, hey, well, you know, this happened 150 years ago, so I can live this way, or you owe me that. This is the oldest picture that I have of any of my ancestors. This was taken in 1889 in Broken Bow, Nebraska. I don't know about you, but I don't see much back behind that house there. That is my great-great-grandfather. And obviously my great-great-grandmother. And hence my great-grandfather, I believe, is in her arms. I think that's what my dad said. Now, they didn't have much protection from the sun, and as you can see, they're just working the land as best they can. How do you like those trees? not exactly what I call a shade tree, huh? If you're an ant, maybe. But there's my family. Now, I really doubt that they're all that lily white out there in that sun. They probably got pretty tan. In fact, I've got some pictures of me. And for like a week in July in Phoenix, every day we went out and we played like 3 hours of tennis from like noon to 3. And they were outdoor courts. So I was darker in those areas where I was exposed to the sun. I was darker that summer than many people that call themselves African Americans today.
In the New York Times article titled "Debunking a Myth, the Irish Were Not Slaves Too," by Liam Stack, 2017, it says, it has shown up on Irish trivia Facebook pages, in Scientific American magazines, and on white nationalist message boards. The little-known story of the Irish slaves who built America, who are sometimes said to have outnumbered and been treated worse than slaves from Africa. But it's not true. Historians say the idea of Irish slaves is based on a misreading of history and that the distortion is often politically motivated. Far-right memes have taken off online and are used as racist barbs against African Americans. The Irish were slaves too. The memes often say, "We got over it, so why can't you?" A small group of Irish and American scholars has spent years pushing back on this false history. In 2016, 82 Irish scholars and writers signed an open letter denouncing the Irish slave myth and asking publications to stop mentioning it. Some complied, removing or revising articles that referenced the false claims, but the letter's impact was limited. The legal differences between indentured servitude and chattel slavery were profound. According to Matthew Riley, an archaeologist who studies Barbados, unlike slaves, servants were considered legally human. Their servitude was based on a contract that limited their service to a finite period of time, usually about 7 years, in exchange for passage to the colonies. They did not pass their unfree status on to descendants. Contemporary accounts in Ireland sometimes refer to these people as slaves. Mr. Hogan said that was true in the sense that any form of coerced labor can be described as slavery from ancient Rome to modern day human trafficking. But in colonial America and the Caribbean, the word slavery had a specific legal meaning. Europeans, by definition, were not included in it. I want to reiterate this point here. The word slavery had a specific legal meaning. Europeans, by definition, were not included in it. An indenture implies two people have entered into a contract with each other, but slavery is not a contract, said Leslie Harris, a professor of African American history at Northwestern University. It is often about being a prisoner of war or being bought or sold bodily as part of a trade. That is a critical distinction. Lastly, this 1908 photograph of fishermen in the parish of St. John, Barbados is often used to illustrate memes that falsely claim Irish were slaves in the colonial America. Now let's continue to debunk this troubling quote, "We got over it, so why can't you?" In this article from the National Geographic's Facts, Myths, and Traditions of St. Patrick, it says, another St. Patrick myth is the claim that he banished snakes from Ireland. It's true, no snakes exist on the island today. Lutherologist Freeman said, but they never did. Ireland, after all, is surrounded by icy waters, much too cold to allow snakes to migrate from Britain or anywhere else. Since snakes often represent evil in literature, when Patrick drives the snakes out of Ireland, it is symbolically saying he drove the old evil pagan ways out of Ireland and brought in a new age, Freeman said. The snake myth, the shamrock story, and other tales were likely spread by well-meaning monks centuries after St. Patrick's death, Freeman said. Again, no snakes existed on the island today, Lutherologist Freeman said, but they never did. Clearly, the elevation and location of Ireland makes it impossible for snakes to migrate there. Why would the church associate snakes to the story of St. Patrick? My conclusion is St. Patrick is just the face of an overall system of delusions initiated by the Roman Catholic and Christian Church. These fables, in other words, inventions, were created to sensationalize the underlying cruelty of their agenda to spread what's called the new faith. During the lynching period, or the time of Odin, these perpetrators actually created postcards from the actual pictures taken of those subjected to their extreme cruelty. These postcards were sold and mailed through the United States Postal Service. See, the celebration of St. Patrick's Day has the same overtone as the lynching postcards. Unfortunately, we all have been blinded by the cover-up of the acts of hatred by the Roman Catholic and Christian Church. I am confident that you will never view St. Patrick's Day the same way again, and this information should provoke you to go deeper in your understanding of history. The article goes on to say, since snakes often represent evil in literature, when Patrick drives the snakes out of Ireland, it is symbolically saying he drove the old evil pagan ways out of Ireland and brought in a new age, Freeman said. So again, snakes often represent evil in literature. When Patrick drives the snakes out of Ireland, it is symbolically saying he drove the old evil pagan ways out of Ireland and brought in a new age. What is the old evil pagan ways Patrick supposedly had driven out? Who were the original people they labeled old evil pagans? What does the word pagan mean? Where did it originate? The etymology of the word pagan says person of non-Christian or non-Jewish faith, villager, rustic, civilian, non-combatant, country people, civilian, incompetent soldier. It goes on to say the English word was used later in a narrower sense of one not a Christian, Jew, or Muslim, as person of heathenish character or habits. What stands out about the etymology of the word pagan is villager, country people. Again, who were the villagers driven out of Ireland? I encourage you to make a note of the additional comments listed in the definition of the online etymology dictionary of the word pagan. It says, pagan and heathen are primarily the same in meaning, but pagan is sometimes distinctively applied to those nations, although worshiping false gods are more cultivated, as the Greeks and Romans, and heathen to uncivilized idolaters, as the tribes of Africa. A Mohammedan is not counted a pagan, much less a heathen, according to the Century Dictionary, 1897. Again, heathen to uncivilized idolaters, as the tribes of Africa. The word uncivilized was primarily used to describe rebellious Negroes who fought and stood against enslavement. This adjective is used throughout the Willie Lynch letter. Uncivilized was a label attached to all Negroes who rebelled against the institution of slavery. This is the same tone Bishop Eric Mason, Pastor Damon Richardson, Vocab Malone, and other apologists deceptively promote. Every image they display of the Hebrew Israelites will always be what seems to be, as they characterize, uncivilized images of the Hebrew Israelites. Pagan primarily is used to describe supposedly civilized people who do not follow Catholicism, Christianity, Judaism. We also see how the Catholic Christian Church clearly separates Muslims from the words pagan and heathen. Why? If St. Patrick did not drive out snakes, what or who did he drive out? This is coming from Journal of the Royal Institution of Cornwall, Volume 15, 1901 through 1902, page 280 and 281. The origins of the dwarfs, elves, gnomes, and leprechauns. I believe that the first human beings who entered Cornwall in the Neolithic period belonged to a race of dwarfs or pygmies and were veritable little people. The study of dwarf races is a new branch of anthropology, and it has wonderfully developed during the last 20 years. Ancient classical authors mention pygmies living in remote parts of Asia and Africa, and the conflicts of the latter with the cranes are described in amusing language. These stories were for long thought to be childish inventions, but recent discoveries have proved that they were perfectly correct. When the Dutch occupied South Africa, they met with the dwarf Bushmen, who are the smallest pygmies in the world. The Spaniards also had become acquainted with the Adas and Mamanuas, dwarf races of the Philippine Islands, and Europeans before long discovered the dwarfs of the Andaman Islands, who are known as Minkapis. In Africa, new dwarf tribes were constantly being found, such as the Sokos by Dr. Kraft and the Obangos by M. Du Chaillu. It is now held by many anthropologists that a number of dwarf races formed the earliest human inhabitants of Central Africa. Mr. P. G.R. Paliburton has traced these pygmy races into Morocco and Spain. Long ago, Jacob Grimm concluded from the tradition of elves, gnomes, and trolls currently in Germany that dwarf races inhabited Central Europe in prehistoric times. And Professor Nielsen has come to the same conclusion concerning Scandinavia. Again, dwarf races inhabited Central Europe in prehistoric times. The so-called tradition of elves, gnomes, and trolls actually derived from an African dwarf group labeled pygmies. Every story, every movie, every book you see that refer to elves, gnomes, trolls is an actual replacement of an African people and their heritage. Movies such as Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and etc. are birthed from actual stories of genocide of the original people who dwelt in Central Europe during what's considered prehistoric times. Going back to the book Journal of the Royal Institution of Cornwall, Volume 15, 1901 through 1902, page 282, says this: I would apply these conclusions to Cornwall. We have our legends of piskies, fairies, and little people, as these stories are now understood in Europe to refer to a real race of prehistoric dwarfs. So I believe we may understand them with reference to Cornwall. I believe then that our piskies and fairies were genuine Cornish dwarfs belonging to a real race of diminutive human beings. As to the fairies, they had a similar origin. They were not the dethroned gods of the heathen Celts, nor were they the spirits of unbaptized children or of druids who had rejected Christianity, but they were originally dwarfs and pygmies similar to the piskies. Again, our piskies and fairies were genuine Cornish dwarfs belonging to a real race. It goes on to say, and has shown that the Picts houses of Scotland and fairy legends of the North may be traced to a race of prehistoric dwarfs. That able Celtic scholar, Professor Fees, has lately in a valuable work set forth the view that a dwarf race inhabited Britain previous to the Celtic invasion, and these views have met with general acceptance. It goes on to say, this also will explain the tradition existing among French peasantry that the fairies were mortal, and the stories that long ago they were actually killed in Wales. Cornwall then was in the earlier days of the Neolithic age, inhabited by a race of pygmies like the Bushmen of South Africa, and whom for convenience I shall call the Pisky dwarfs. Again, Cornwall then was in the early days of the Neolithic age, inhabited by a race of pygmies like the Bushmen of South Africa. The diminutive flint arrowheads found all over Western Europe furnish another proof of the existence of these pygmies. These little arrowheads occur in France, some only half an inch long, being figured by M. de Mortale. They have been found in a kitchen midden at Hastings. They abound in Ireland, and the Pev Reginald Gaddy has found large numbers of them in Yorkshire. They are found also in Germany and in Poland. Again, they abound in Ireland. The Etymology Dictionary definition of leprechaun says, a very small body, little, small. Let's go to the book Celtic Myth and Legend, page 20. It says, in physique it was short, swarthy, dark hair, dark eyed, and long skull. Its language belonged to this class called Hamitic, the surviving types of which are found in the Gauls, Abyssinians, Berbers, and other North African tribes, and it seems to have come originally from some part either of Eastern, Northern, or Central Africa. Spreading thence, it was probably the first people to inhabit the Valley of the Nile, and it sent offshoots into Syria and Asia Minor. So again, its language belonged to the class called Hamitic. Contrary to what historians have deceptively taught, these references easily debunk the contradictions that the original Egyptians were Europeans. Again, probably the first people to inhabit the Valley of the Nile. The people St. Patrick actually murdered was the Twa. St. Patrick is simply the reoccurring image or the face of the entire Church of Catholicism and Christianity. The entire story and celebration of St. Patrick is the celebration commemorating genocide. Is the cancellation of this Irish parade strictly a coincidence? Absolutely not. What is a witch? What image comes to mind when you think about a witch or a witch doctor? Is it a woman with a large bump on her nose, wearing all black, green face, riding on a broom, and standing over her famous crystal ball? Is it a woman that has a bone in her nose and her eyes to the back of her head while gyrating? Is it a man with locks, Creole accent, and tossing chicken bones on the ground? What is your perception of a witch? I want to take the time out to give you an accurate understanding of what biblical witchcraft is and how the urban apologists are operating in it. We have been institutionalized in how and what we think about witches. Let's get a better understanding of witches, warlocks, witch doctors, and witchcraft. To do this, let's go to Galatians chapter 5, verse 19 through 21. It says, now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. What is the works of the flesh? The works of the flesh is the works of iniquity. The Greek word for iniquity is pronounced anomia, which means violation of the law, wickedness, transgression of the law. The Hebrew word for iniquity is pronounced awan, which means to crook, pervert, do perverse, do wickedly, do wrong, to bend, twist, distort. What Galatians chapter 5 verse 19 through 21 is actually saying is that a worker of iniquity is a person who pervert, bend, twist, distort, and promote the violation of the law of Yahweh. There are laws that govern every aspect of our lives. There is the law of physics, the law of astronomy, the law of nature, the law of motion, the law of chemicals, the law of medicine, just to name a few. Let's confirm this with scripture. Matthew chapter 7, verse 22 and 23 says, "Many will say to me in that day, Adonai, Adonai, or Adonai, Adonai. Have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name done many wonderful works? And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye worker of iniquity." A worker of iniquity is someone who operates in rebellion. It is someone who resists and rebels against authority. A key weapon of a worker of iniquity is the usage of witchcraft, which is a form of rebellion. Based on the biblical description of a worker of iniquity, which is synonymous to a witch, they are false teachers of the scriptures. They hide behind the titles of a bishop, an apostle, pastor, evangelist, and etc. Many of them are bending, twisting, and distorting the commandments of Yahweh. The scripture gives a stern approach in handling those who are operating in biblical witchcraft. Exodus chapter 22 verse 18 says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Again, what is a witch? Let's start with defining a witch doctor. Merriam-Webster Dictionary says this: a witch doctor is a professional worker of magic, usually in a primitive society, who often works to cure sickness. Again, a witch doctor is a professional worker of magic. The Etymology Dictionary definition of magic says, art of influencing or predicting events and producing marvels, usually hidden natural forces. Sorcery, one of the members of the learned and priestly class. Magician, priest. A witch doctor in Hebrew pronounced kashaf, which is a priest who specializes in the art of influence and manipulation. So what's the difference between a witch doctor and a witch? The Etymology Dictionary definition of the word witch says, female magician, sorceress, a woman supposed to have dealings with the devil or evil spirits, and to be able by their cooperation to perform supernatural acts. Sorcerer, wizard, man who practiced witchcraft or magic. Divination, necromancer, in other words, one who wakes the dead. Again, a witch doctor is a professional worker of magic, which is synonymous to witchcraft. So they could be a male or female. And so the Etymology Dictionary definition of witchcraft says magic, power, skill. The word witchcraft is synonymous to the word charm. The Etymology Dictionary definition of charm says incantation, magic charm, magic spell, incantation, song, enchantment, religious formula. From the word canary, which means to sing. The key word in understanding the word charm is the word canary. So again, it means to sing. See, the entire urban apologetic community, they are a group of canaries. They are singing the songs or talking points developed by the Jewish community, as I exposed in the first video. Their entire playbook comes directly from the Jewish community. Notice how the entire group will not respond to the Jewish Almanac, page 3, that I highlighted in the first video, that says it is incorrect to call an ancient Israelite a Jew or a contemporary Jew an Israelite. Why? Because they have been charmed. They are simply canaries. They are functioning under the spirit of ventriloquy. They are simply reciting or regurgitating songs that was given to them. My grandmother always said, wherever there's a witch, there is a warlock. The Etymology Dictionary definition of the word charm says to recite or cast a magic spell, to enchant, to fill, in other words, someone with desire, in other words, for something, to maltreat, harm, song, verse, enchantment, religious formula. In this video, I am going to further prove that the urban apologists, who I call Psuedo Apologia, are operating in witchcraft.
Hey guys, it's Neppy. Thank you for joining me once again for another session of Christian Black Woke, where we discuss issues related to being Christian, being Black, and or being woke. Today we're going to discuss a piece of evidence used by some Hebrew Israelites to prove that African Americans are neither African nor are they American, but their ancestry is found in the land of Israel. And this is the evidence that they use to prove that we are not descendants of Africans. Here it is. Ham, perhaps hot, perhaps. The youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. His descendancy, when his father lay drunken, brought a curse upon his indecency, His indecency when his father lay drunken brought a curse upon Canaan. I want to take you into the mind of when this dictionary entry was originally written and what the pervading thought of the day was, what people typically thought about Negroes. So here's a book written in 1900 entitled The Negro, a Beast, or In the Image of God. So this is a question, basically, this is the discussion, it's framing the discussion that it's about to have as to whether Negroes are beasts or were we created in the image of God. The term Semite is derived from Noah's son Shem, right? And then it talks about the 5, you see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 descendants. And here they are, the Akkadians, which are Babylonian and Assyrians, the Arameans, then we have the Canaanites, but I thought Canaan was under Ham, huh? The Ethiopians and the Arabs and the Ethiopians are all considered Semites, but how can Canaan fit in here if he was supposed to be under Ham? Why you no make sense? Why you confuse me? What I think is really interesting is that in this email, Zondervan, of course, says, well, we don't have any racist history. No. But what's really interesting is that the pastor who's presenting this information glosses right over the fact that Zondervan is saying that the Hebrew Israelites are using the dictionary quote out of context and that they are not, Zondervan is not saying that Negroes are the sons of Shem. Yeah, that kind of backfired, buddy. So this video is edited. I wanted to highlight those portions that the pastor skipped right over. You guys pay attention and see here for yourselves.
I want to read to you the speedy response I received from the Senior Vice President of Zondervan Publishing in response to my concerns about Nefer Nitty's bold claim with suggesting that the entry, not the Negro, comes from the racist book titled The Negro, a Beast. I want to thank Stan for responding to my concerns with a sense of urgency. This is what it says. Dear Pastor Richardson, thank you for sending this information to us, including the link to the video by Nefer Nitty. First, I want you to know that Zondervan would never knowingly publish something that was intended to support racism or discrimination based on one's ethnicity. This title was originally produced by a Zondervan employee and published back in the 1960s. This is the first time that I am aware of, and I have been with Zondervan for 40 years, that anyone has raised concerns about the article on Ham. I believe that Nitty's interpretation of the article is based on a misreading and misinterpretation of the dictionary article perpetuated by Black Hebrew Israelites. I hope the following is helpful. There is a certain irony in this interpretation of the phrase, not the Negroes. The Black Hebrew Israelites take the phrase out of context. The Black Hebrew Israelites take the phrase out of context. The Black Hebrew Israelites take the phrase out of context.
The Black Hebrew Israelites take the phrase out of context
and use it as scholarly proof that Negroes are not Africans, but apparently Israelites. Here is an example of the witchcraft the Urban Apologists operate in. This entire pseudo group is a group of liars. They have no shame in bending and twisting the truth. Remember, the Greek word for iniquity is pronounced anomia, which means violation of the law, wickedness, transgression of the law. The Hebrew word for iniquity is pronounced awan, which means to crook, pervert, do perverse, do wickedly, do wrong, to bend, twist, distort. I am going to use Nefer Nitty's comments and deceptive edits to the video I did in response to her false assertions that the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary's entry on Ham comes from the book The Negro, a Beast by Chad Collins in 1900. In conjunction to the initial video I did, I wrote an email to Zondervan requesting them to give proper clarity to the Not the Negroes entry. Their response was clear and concise, explaining that both the Hebrew Israelites and Nefer Nitty are completely wrong in how the entry is interpreted. Let's do a side-by-side comparison to expose the lies, starting with the attorney Nefer Nitty. She continues to prove that she lacks integrity and she is very deceptive at what she does. Let's bring out our scoreboard and keep a count of the number of lies and deceptions in her short response. Lie number 1. Zondervan, of course, says, we don't have a racist history. No, no, no.
What I think is really interesting is that in this email, Zondervan, of course, says, well, we don't have any racist history. No, no, no.
Notice how Nefer Nitty deceptively began her video with a biased comment to her listeners in an attempt to get them to totally reject Zondervan's response to her false claims. Let's put the first points up on the lie and deception scoreboard. Here is the actual quote Nefer Nitty selectively, in her own words, glossed over. Dear Pastor Richardson, thank you for sending this information to us, including the link to the video by Nefer Nitty. First, I want you to know that Zondervan would never knowingly publish something that was intended to support racism or discrimination based on one's ethnicity. This title was originally produced by a Zondervan employee and published back in the 1960s. This is the first time that I am aware of, and I have been with Zondervan for 40 years, that anyone has raised concerns about the article on Ham. I believe that Nitty's interpretation of the article is based on a misreading and misinterpretation of the dictionary article perpetuated by Black Hebrew Israelites. I hope the following is helpful. There is a certain irony in this interpretation of the phrase, not the Negroes. The Black Hebrew Israelites take the phrase out of context and use it as scholarly proof that Negroes are not Africans, but apparently Israelites. But Nitty links the phrase to a racist book apparently published in 1800 that attempted to support slavery of Negroes with scripture. Notice in the video I presented, the quotes are there with highlights to bring more attention to his comments. Lie number 2, the pastor who is presenting this information glosses right over the fact that Zondervan says the Hebrew Israelites is using the dictionary quote out of context. If I really wanted to be deceptive, all I had to do is simply not mention the comments about the Hebrew Israelites at all, nor would I highlight the comments Zondervan made towards the Hebrew Israelites. Let's put another point up on the lie and deception scoreboard. Lie number 3. Nefer Nitty states that she is going to highlight the areas that the pastor skipped over. Lie number 4. She purposely did not show the actual page rips displayed in the video that actually highlights the very thing Nefer Nitty lied and said I glossed over. We are only 1 minute into her video and already I have identified 4 lies. The only honesty in her video is her stating that her video is edited. Lie number 5. Nefer Nitty blatantly did not include the first bullet in the email, which Zondervan clearly debunks Nefer Nitty's deceptive attempt to connect the entry on Ham to the book The Negro, a Beast. I believe that Nitty's interpretation of the article is based on a misreading and misinterpretation of the dictionary article perpetuated by Black Hebrew Israelites. I hope the following is helpful. There is a certain irony in this interpretation of the phrase, not the Negroes. The Black Hebrew Israelites take the phrase out of context. The Black Hebrew Israelites take the phrase out of context. The Black Hebrew Israelites take the phrase out of context.
The Black Hebrew Israelites take the phrase out of context
and use it as scholarly proof that Negroes are not Africans, but apparently Israelites. Why then does the editor of the dictionary include the phrase, not the Negro? Here's the entire entry she purposely left out. I believe that Nitty's interpretation of the article is based on a misreading and misinterpretation of the dictionary article perpetuated by Black Hebrew Israelites. I hope the following is helpful. There is a certain irony in this interpretation of the phrase, not the Negroes. The Black Hebrew Israelites take the phrase out of context and use it as scholarly proof that Negroes are not Africans, but apparently Israelites. But Nitty links the phrase to a racist book apparently published in 1800 that attempted to support slavery of Negroes with scripture. Well, here's my response. First, it is highly unlikely that the editor who produced Zondervan's Compact Bible Dictionary was even aware of the book from 1800 that apparently argued that the exclusion of Negroes from the list of the descendants of Ham was evidence that they were not made in the image of God. In other words, that they were less than fully human, thus justifying the enslavement of Negroes. Why then does the editor of the dictionary include the phrase, not the Negro? So far, Nefer Nitty's score is 5 on the Lies and Deception scoreboard. The bullet she purposely left out should count for an additional 3 points on the scoreboard. In this article on Ham and his descendants, I can only guess, but here is the likely explanation. We must also remember that if the flood was not universal, in other words, worldwide, and did not destroy all of humanity worldwide, there could well have been people who survived the flood because it did not impact their part of the world. However, the question of whether or not the flood was worldwide and destroyed all of humanity except Noah and his descendants is a very controversial topic. In any event, the two different interpretations of the article on Ham by the Black Hebrew Israelites and Nefer are both wrong. Notice how she placed the point of emphasis on I can only guess as a way of her attempting to discredit Zondervan's response, which they are clear that her conclusion hold no weight. But in the same breath, she wants to uphold and rewind their responses towards the Hebrew Israelites. So that takes Nefer Nitty's score to 6 on the Lie and Deception scoreboard. Unfortunately, Nefer Nitty's lies and deceptions did not stop here. She purposely and deceptively did not include almost the entire second bullet, in which the author explains how those who support the enslavement of the Negroes deceptively teach the scriptures out of context to say that the Negroes were cursed with dark skin and that this so-called curse is a perpetual bondage. This lie and deception should completely disqualify her from ever attempting to teach and or represent anyone in any type of litigation again. Listen to the entire clip she selectively and deceptively withheld from her listeners. In this article on Ham and his descendants, I can only guess, but here is the likely explanation. Noah pronounced a curse on Ham, one of Ham's sons, and said that Canaan. Why then does the editor of the dictionary include the phrase, not the Negro? In this article on Ham and his descendants, I can only guess, but here is the likely explanation. Noah pronounced a curse on Ham and one of Ham's sons, and said that Canaan, and by implication Canaan's descendants, would be a slave to his brothers, and by implication to their descendants. Those who have attempted to argue that the Bible supports slavery of Negroes have also argued that Abram's curse on Ham's sons Canaan included Negroes. So it is likely that the editor of this dictionary included the phrase "not the Negroes" in order to make it clear that the curse on Ham, Canaan, did not at all have in mind Negroes. Therein is the irony in this situation. What the editor likely intended as evidence that the curse did not apply to Negroes is now being used as evidence that Negroes are less human and hence candidates for slavery. That raises the question, from which of Noah's sons do the Negroes come from? Answer: the text does not tell us, just as it does not tell us from which son Asians are descended. It is likely that the list of Noah's descendants are intended to be representative of all humanity, but not an exhaustive listing of every ethnic group. Of course, we must also remember that if the flood was not universal, in other words, worldwide, and did not destroy all of humanity worldwide, there could well have been people who survived the flood because it did not impact their part of the world. However, the question of whether or not the flood was worldwide and destroyed all of humanity except Noah and his descendants is a very controversial topic. In any event, the two different interpretations of the article on Ham by the Black Hebrew Israelites and Nefer are both wrong. They are reading ideas into the article that were not intended to be there and logically are not there. Lie number 7. There is no need for me to make any additional comments or commentaries on Nefer Nitty's blatant lies and deceptions. I'm going to let you listen to her last deception for yourself. How she deceptively cut out part of my comments, giving an honest summary and assessment of this letter. I want to reiterate the point Stan made. The phrase "not the Negro" has no connection to the book The Negro a Beast by Chaz Carroll and the other books Nefer Nitty referenced in her video, nor does it have any connection with the belief that it means that the Negroes are Israelites. I want to reiterate the point Stan made. The phrase "not the Negro" has no connection to the book The Negro a Beast by Chaz Carroll and the other books Nefer Nitty referenced in her video, nor does it have any connections with the belief that it means that the Negroes are Israelites. It was used to show that the Negroes was not cursed to be a slave.
Obviously, me having a personal experience from Hebrew Israel-ism, it's I guess it's how can I say?